Yeah, so we are still focusing on basically the questions of the adverse childhood experience questionnaire. It's a set of 10 questions that people can take by scanning the QR code there on the left, top left. And that will take them to my website. They can they have the 10 questions there. They can answer them. There's no commercial setup or anything like that. It's just for the information of the viewer. And we have been going through every one of these questions to try to bring some stories and sort of enrich the understanding of these questions, right, Rene? And today, I think for the second live, we want to focus on the fifth question here, which is to do with neglect. So if I read the question, often or very often I felt that no one in my family loved me or thought I was important or special. I think you'll be sharing a story with us in a minute that kind of really reflects this sort of situation. Or B, my family didn't look out for each other, please feel close to each other or support each other, right? I have a bunch of stories. I know you want to share a very interesting story, so I want to give you the word this time and hear it from you.
Absolutely. What I really like about the introduction we did last time is where we're able to share how this denial of someone's human needs can really get them in either a hyper state or a hypo state. And I really got to enjoy the insight we're able to get kind of foundationally to really lay the foundation of how to get to understand this subject that we're getting into. And let me just share a story that I feel will be relevant to those foundational principles that we now know. Is that a friend of mine that I met in university, he is late 20s. He was around 28 when I met him, a mixed race man. He was half Swiss. His father was from Switzerland. His mother was from Seychelles. Seychelles is actually an African country off the coast of the Indian Ocean around Madagascar, just for clarity. So this young man, still young man at 28, he grew up mainly around his father. Um, and his father used to travel a lot. So from his very foundational years, from very young, around from I would say from inception to around teenage years, they travel a lot. I think they travel to maybe 6, 7 countries. And being mixed race, you can imagine that the different countries and the cultures got to perceive him quite differently, and it was quite polarizing. Whereby in some countries he was not black enough, in some countries he was not white enough. So he was never really fully accepted, and he was experiencing a lot of indifference from people when it comes to social acceptance. And one of his primary trials in trying to get social acceptance when he was around 12, 13, knowing those adolescent years, you want to identify yourself, understand girls, and understand that companionship, your curiosity. He tried to approach a lady that he found attractive. She was a white lady, but he was not accepted. His advances were not found in good favor, and the reason was because he was mixed race. That the fact that he was mixed race, it wasn't something that she preferred. However, I would say in maybe a year later, in the same country, actually, he found a lady who accepted him, and he was so happy. As a teenager, you feel like you're getting to figure out yourself and figure out women, and finding yourself in a space after so many years of moving around, that someone will actually accept you more than even your family themselves. So he gets to be accepted and gets a place whereby he doesn't experience the disregard that he gets from his father and his parents. However, a week into a point whereby they were able to maybe find a label to this relationship and really say that I have a girlfriend, his father told him in one evening that tomorrow we are moving countries. And that really hits hard more than the other times, because in this time it means that he will have to end his relationship that he's just started and just got to really enjoy. And
Become attached to, I guess.
yes, he got very attached to, and it was a place that he found home, that he found embraced and accepted, even as he's trying to figure out how to accept himself as a teenager. So within 12 hours, he had to break that relationship. So he had to go meet this lady and, in a very brief interaction, tell her straight up, I'm leaving in about 6 hours and you'll never meet me again, and they have to end this. And the lady didn't take it any well. She took it very badly. She was heartbroken, and it just made his experience even worse. That I'm hurt, and I've hurt someone that I really love. So the fact that he went through that, he really got to experience disregard, denial of his own human rights, of the human need of connection, human need of and trying to understand himself and get to find someone who will embrace him as he wants to. And after that, his relationships have, as from the point that I got to interact with him, his relationship were also very short term. Being a father, he was a father, and he was not in any long term relationship with the mother of the child. And the disconnect that he experienced from that age carried forward to his own relationships, to the women, and also to the mother of his children. So I think, Nicholas, from this story, we can see how this individual, this friend of mine, was able to take this experience of getting, denied, getting disregarded, and the inattention to his own needs as a teenager, and experience it and project that experience going forward as an adult. So I think, what do you think, Nicholas? Do you think we can actually see how the manifestation carries forward into adulthood?
Well, if it's if it's a one-off event,
Yeah.
it would be very hard for us to pin this event to neglect, because of course the experience of being invalidated in life is a common experience, an experience that we will all go through. We all have been, we've all gone through, and if not, we all go through it at some point. Um, but I think I'm reading, because of the movement of the father, the first thing that is happening here is that every time this child moves, he has to detach from the friends, the things that have become familiar to him, the things and the people that have become familiar to him. And of course, as a child, we have often commented how there is sort of this natural tendency for the child to want to bond with the primary caregivers, and then the people that are part of the close circle around the primary caregivers, be it an uncle or a primary school teacher or the kindergarten teacher, and then the peers. And so that's already starting to look like a life prior to adolescence, where his basic need for love and bonding and attachment and belonging is not really being fulfilled. So, to what extent this is the result of his primary caregivers neglecting this child's natural needs for affection and bonding and belonging, I'm not sure. I don't know from the story. Maybe we need to know more.
I think that the fact that we also got to understand, and I got to understand from the not just the moving, but the social acceptance, whereby there's nowhere there was no setup or social setup or demographic whereby he was enough. He was either too white or too black, and generally he was never completely fitting in and blending in with any society fully.
So,
He was,
okay, that's a good point. I think that's an important point. So, what does that tell us? Yes, first of all, the accent of not being enough, right? Like
yeah,
you're not white enough for us, and then you're not black enough for us, right? Um, so that accent of on not enough, how might have that resonated with other primary experiences with his primary caregivers where he gets the sense that he's not enough? Um, do you have any more details about his interaction with his father and mother?
absolutely. Actually, when he was able to, I would say, conclude and do what he and end that relationship, he went back to his father and said, "Okay, I've ended that relationship. I think we're ready to go." But he got to express that it has hurt me that I have to end this relationship because she's a good person and someone I care about. And he was quickly brushed off. His emotions were brushed off and said, "You'll get over it. It's nothing big. You're just 14, 15, you're a teenager. These things happen. It doesn't matter." So that also the disregard and the neglect of understanding how he felt in that moment, understanding how instrumental that particular experience was for him growing up. The dad didn't understand how he felt going to school. Maybe he didn't even care that in this particular country, I'm not white enough. In this particular country, I'm not black enough. The father maybe was just thinking that I can operate, so you can operate as well. But also the the father had no attention at all to how he was fitting in into these countries and realizing that this particular setup he was able to find some solace whereby he's embraced, he's found someone who accepts him for what it is, and the father just thought it's just a normal puppy love that I'm at.
Yeah, it's quite probable that there is a lot more to this connection that he finds with this girl than, the sexual attraction, which is amazing and profound when you are an adolescent. The first time you fall in love and all of that is just grand, right? All of those emotions are extremely amplified, and the significance of those explorations, because they are the first, and you know they're the first steps into a young adulthood. They're in and of themselves very significant, but perhaps they are even more overloaded because his need for recognition and his need for really just basic emotional validation is really up there, we would imagine. Right, we don't really know, at some level. Being having been myself a child of parents that moved a lot. I changed 6 schools and 5 different cities and 3 countries and 2 languages by the age of 10. Um, and I don't think a parent can do that to a child if they are aware that the child, every time he moves to a new location, he feels grief and loss, for the things that he has become attached to. I think the assumption at the moment is that, generally speaking, in the public, with parents, is that if the child is not articulating with words, like if the child is not speaking out uh, the element of pain, then it doesn't exist.
Mm.
So if the child at 6 is not saying, it just makes me so sad to leave this place, and say it over and over and over, then it doesn't exist. And usually a child of 6 or 4 or 3 or 7 or 8 or 9, they won't speak things out because they don't have the brain that allows them the self-awareness that we as adults sometimes get to. Not many adults get to see their own emotions and then to be eloquent about, you know, what they're feeling. Usually the language of a child is acting out. And as we have seen with the basic examples that we gave last week, that acting out can come in the form of exaggerated sort of acting out, as in crying, for example, or shouting, or anger, or frustration, but also hypostates where you shut down, right?
Yeah.
I think this is not well understood in parenthood in general, and therefore children very much go unnoticed when they are presented with this series of challenges. And it is very much more natural for a child to, I wouldn't say desire stability, but to benefit from stability than it is for that child to benefit from extremely wide changes. Because even if you were to argue to me, hey Nick, but you know, until some thousands years ago, we were always nomading around, we were always moving around. Yeah, well, first of all, to this day, most people in the world will not have gone any further than 20 kilometers radius from where they were born. Okay, even to this day, in these days and age, most people will never go away from a 20 kilometers radius. And if we go back when we were hunter-gatherers, these hunter-gathering small communities, first of all, they were in very small communities and tribes, so their bonds were very, 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 very strong, right? That's something that we don't have today. And then they were just going in circles. They were following the seasons within a certain circuit. They knew where the animals were, they knew where the water was, you know, they knew where some things to pass the winter was. Humans never really needed to go any further in general. Of course, there were exceptional cases. I think back then and still today, the outliers who would just go one way and for their whole life just walk straight to the north, you know, or walk straight to the east or the west or the south. But for the most part, communities were sticking together and their sense of belonging was very attached to environment. So environments were actually also, as far as we know from one of the first religions, they were animistic religions, meaning that the whole environment was alive like they were alive. There was no distinction of I'm a human and that's nature. There was no such a thing. Nature environments were part of them, were being part of their community. So they would become very acquainted with each other, environments and people, right? Today, when we transpose the experience of movement in our global, highly technologized, modern societies, we are exposing children to levels of change that are absolutely, absolutely unknown to the brain in evolutionary sense. But they're easy because if I work for the military or an embassy or something, well, I just need to catch an airplane. Within a few hours, I'm literally on the other side of the world. Different weather. I can go from summer to winter. I can go from, you know, jungle to almost desertic landscapes. I can go from a language to another, meaning nobody will understand me in the next region, right? And if you're a professional and you're doing that and you're working within your network of professional sort of connections, you may be much less exposed than the child itself, because you are exposed to colleagues who also speak a different language or English or share your common interest. But a little child who, you know, is formulating ideas about how the world works and how safe it is, especially, always how safe it is, when he is exposed to such different environments, and every community brings its level of discrimination towards the foreign element towards the outsider, you know, the experience for the child is very, very, very different. I also experienced discrimination every single time I moved to a different city and a different school. Something was different about me. And the more I became different, the more that difference was recognizable, the more I would get expelled and ejected and not wanted initially, or bullied. And of course, there were those 2 or 3 elements in those groups that would accept me and that would connect with me. But, you know, the larger environment was one of disregard for I guess the complexity that I carried, right? So let's bring this back to the element of neglect, right? Like, we want to think of neglect in terms of what is not there rather than in terms of what is there, and that not there causes just as much pain as what was there. So if previously we had talked about you being insulted, you being pushed around and physically abused and even sexually abused, now we are comparing that pain to you not receiving love, not being acknowledged emotionally, being, yes, challenged and put through experiences that are extremely challenging or very different, and for that difference not to be acknowledged. And these being carried over long periods of time. Okay, so these pains are equal. And today in the field of psychology, neglect is absolutely a tremendous subject of attention, I would say.
Absolutely.
I would have loved to bring a story of a client that I met a little while ago, but we are really out of time. So unfortunately, we'll have to wait until next time. Hopefully, we will have the opportunity to present this case. We'll see if we want to say a bit more about neglect or not. But Rene, it's been a pleasure talking to you. What an interesting subject.